There's food all around. You just need to know what to look for. Hello, my name is Malcolm Saunders. I'm here with...
Sandor Katz.
All right, we're out on a little adventure and we've come across some wild berries and we want to show you how to gather any kind of fruit, any kind of berry. Here we have...
These are buffalo berries. Oh, okay. I'm showing it to the wrong place. Buffalo berries. Today I've had my first introduction to delicious buffalo berries, and so we're harvesting buffalo berries, and then right next to them are rose hips, and then we're going to go back and make a little lightly fermented soft drink with them, sort of a naturally fermented soda or something like that.
Right on. So you can use any kind of fruit. We just happened to be out on this beautiful, cool autumn day and riding along and spotted these amazing rose hips and then also the buffalo berries that make a fantastic ferment. We'll take them back, we'll have them in the kitchen and we'll show you what to do with them. All right, here we are back at the kitchen. We have our harvest of rose hips and the silverthorn, silverleaf buffalo berry. And what we're going to do, I was asking Sandro earlier, what kind of video should we do? What should we create? And his answer was anything, so long as it's really simple, really easy to do. I had grandiose ideas of, tempeh, miso, those kinds of things. And what I appreciated about Sandro's response was, let's do something really simple, really easy. And in fact, it reminded me of a time that I first did this concept, was picking rose hips out in BC, and they were like big, juicy, fat, delicious rose hips that I actually put into this very container. I filled them up, we were out picking them just like we did this afternoon, and I had covered with water, and I just let it sit. And lo and behold, within a couple of days, it began to have a nice sweetness, a nice light effervescence, and that's the same thing that we're going to do right now. So why don't you guide us through the process, how you've done this type of ferment before?
Well, sure. So, okay. First of all, there are many different directions that you could take a ferment like this. What we're going to do is like a simple, lightly fermented, carbonated, soft drink. But, using the same ingredients, you also could just ferment it longer, and that would allow more alcohol to accumulate. And, you could make what I would describe as a country wine out of the same kinds of fruit. So, the first thing you have to realize is that, any fruit, anything sweet, already is abundantly populated by yeast and lactic acid bacteria. So we don't need to add any kind of a starter to this. All of the microorganisms that we need are already abundant on the rose hips and on the buffalo berries. And by the way, I never ate a buffalo berry until today. Yeah. So what we're going to do is just transfer these, depending on where you harvested them. If you wash them, you don't have to be concerned that you're going to wash the organisms that we need off. If they appear to be clean, I typically wouldn't bother washing them at all. That's kind of situational, and we're just going to put them in our vessel. And then, you could do something extremely simple, where you just cover these with water and allow the sugar from the berries themselves to be the sugar that ferments. Or because we have a relatively small amount of berries, we could bulk it up and get sort of the flavor and the color of the berries infusing into water, and then sort of fortify it by adding some more sugar. Build up flavor density. So if we just so the berries are in here. This is spring water. You want to be really aware. You don't want to use your municipal tap water directly in this, because the chlorine that makes that water safe to drink also can potentially inhibit fermentation. So either use filtered water, water where you've allowed the chlorine to evaporate, or spring or well water, or something that hasn't been treated with chlorine in the first place. So one possibility is to really just cover the berries with water. As little water as possible, and then really just rely on the sugar from the berries to infuse into the water and provide the flavor for the ferment. What we're going to do today is just add more water. We won't fill this all the way up, but we'll fill it maybe, let's say, 2/3 of the way up. that's great.
And one thing I'd asked you earlier was, should we crush these berries? Should we kind of break it up, expose a little bit more of the sugar? And your answer was?
Well, I mean, in general, I don't. I mean, first, let me just be very clear that there are a lot of different ways to do this. And, there's plenty of books you could consult or people you could talk with who would say, absolutely, you want to crush the berries. My perspective, which I learned years ago from a biodynamic farmer friend who made the best homemade wines that I had tasted at that period, he gave me a great sort of biodynamic analysis, which is that it's the essence of the fruit that you want in your beverage. It's not the substance of the fruit. And the substance of fruit includes pectins and other kinds of substances that will, mean that rather than having a nice clear liquid, you'll have something really kind of pulpy. That's almost like a sludge. And then there are various strategies you can use for getting rid of that. But I find that, especially dealing with berries rather than large fruits, plenty of flavor, plenty of sugar infuses into the water. And then really, if you taste the fruit after the fermentation, there's very little flavor left. So I haven't crushed the berries. We've just covered them with water. Interestingly, the rose hips have all floated to the top, and the buffalo berries have sunk to the bottom. So that's interesting. Now we need to add sugar. Do you have a longer spoon that we can use just for mixing it in? I'll tell you that I am personally not very exacting about how much sugar to add. I really like to just add sugar a little bit at a time to taste. So I'll stir it for a moment.
And you could use any type of sugar. Honey would be perfectly acceptable at this
point.
Oh,
absolutely. You could use, any kind of sugar you want. You can't use stevia. It needs to be a true sugar. That can ferment into alcohol, but certainly honey, agave, sorghum, any kind of sugar will work for this. And then I just taste a little bit. So I still think it tastes a little bit thin, so I have a little bit more sugar to it.
This is just a naturally sun-dried cane sugar that we're using here.
And then, you just want to let it sit. The one intervention you need to do is stirring. Basically, like some of the fruit is floating to the top, and if you fail to stir it after a couple days, that might start to get a little bit moldy. By stirring it, you prevent mold from developing. You also speed up the fermentation by mixing oxygen into there. And if you're going for a soft drink, you don't need to ferment it for a long time. I mean, really, depending on the temperature, within a day or two, this should start to be bubbly. I would give it another day of stirring a couple of times and let it ferment with the fruit in there. And then if you want to have a soft drink that is that is not alcoholic, that's the time to drink it. If you let it ferment for many more days, then you'll start to taste alcohol. You could certainly sort of set out to make an alcoholic beverage out of these very same ingredients, and that would just be a longer fermentation. Let's say anywhere beyond about 10 days, and the short fermentation. It's not that it won't have any alcohol. Anytime you're dealing with anything sweet, there's always yeast activity will be part of it, but it's a very negligible amount of alcohol, far below any legal threshold, a level that all kinds of common products that people feed to their children all the time. Orange juice typically tests with a little bit of alcohol. Bread products typically test with a little bit of alcohol. So, it's not that we're really living in this world where like things are alcoholic or not. It's about sort of your proportions. And so if you ferment this for a short time, you get a tiny bit of alcohol, you get a little bit of lactic acid developing, and most significantly, you get carbonation building up. The biggest caution that I have with any kind of carbonated beverage is once you strain out the fruit, and then if you want a carbonated beverage, what you need to do is put it into a bottle and seal it so that the carbon dioxide of fermentation gets trapped in there. But because there's still unfermented sugars in here, you are potentially creating a bomb. So you want to do that very, very cautiously. And the way I like to do it is do at least one of the bottles in a recycled little plastic soda bottle. And then you can just feel how pressurized it's getting. And if you had a vigorous fermentation and it's reasonably warm, then really we're talking about overnight. We're talking about 12 hours, 8 hours, 12 hours in a cooler space, maybe 24 hours. But you don't want it to get overcarbonated, or else possibly the bottle could explode, or when you open it, it'll just spew all over the place. So with carbonation, less is more. Lightly fermented beverages are extremely dynamic. Once you have sense that it's carbonated, get it into the refrigerator to slow down the fermentation. And these are not things like wines that you want to store for 10 years. These are things to enjoy in the relative short term.
Yeah, and it's super simple. So this idea, it's ubiquitous, it's around. All you need is fruit of any kind. We've gone out and wild harvested our own. We've covered with water. In this case, we have added a little bit extra sugar just to bring up the fermentation a little bit more due to the small amount of fruit. We didn't spend all day picking these berries, but enough to add some flavor, some nutrients, some vitamins, some minerals, and bring that wildness from outside.
And also the flavor of the fruit. I mean, this will, this is enhanced by the sugar that we've added, but the flavor of it is going to be the berry flavor. That's going to be the essence of this soft drink.
Yeah, and these silverthorn, silverleaf buffalo berries, if you've never tried them, they grow all around Calgary, many areas, and absolutely delicious. My favorite berry. Very, very few people know about them, but they're a real treat.
And as we usually see with a wild fermentation of wild crafted berries, I mean, the fermentation's already begun. I mean, if you come in and check out a close-up, like you can see bubbles accumulating in the space between the berries on the surface. So this is something that is going to begin, almost immediately, and then build in vigor for a couple of days.
All right. Well, hope you enjoy creating your own wild ferments with fruits, your own country wines. They're delicious, they're nutritious, and it brings wild bacteria into your life. Thanks so much for joining us.